Hello and welcome back to week 2 in our Parenting Today class. This is part 5 of week two's lecture, and we're going to spend this portion of our discussion talking about cultural diversity in the United States. Now, before we go ahead and dive into this material, it's so important for us to remember that when we're working with other people in a professional and even in a personal way, it's important for us to practice cultural relativism. So that's really being embracing, not prejudice, not judgmental of other cultures. It's really embracing with an open attitude, wanting to learn about other cultures. What we don't want to practice as professionals is what's called ethnocentrism. So that would be using your own culture as a yardstick in which to judge other cultures. So I just wanted to put that out there before we begin our very important discussion today in terms of cultural diversity. And we'll begin our discussion by talking about race, which is a social construction, and that's typically viewed as the phenotypic differences that arise from genetic or biological dispositions like skin color or hair texture. It's a controversial topic, right? Here in the United States, there's lots of racism, lots of misunderstandings. It tends to be a taboo topic, but it is something that it's very important that we give attention to. There's actually few genetic differences among races. However, some research tells us that there are some very real health differences, like sickle cell anemia, alcoholism, blood types. There's categories that vary when we talk about race, and some of ones that we see on the U.S. Census are African, Caucasian, Asian, Native American, Pacific Islander. We talk about ethnicity. The definition of ethnicity, you're going to want to remember this for the quiz and going forward in your professional life, is ethnicity is defined as an individual's membership in a group sharing a common ancestral heritage based on nationality, language, as well as culture. So when we refer to ethnicity, a person can have multiple ethnicities, and this can be further complicated by immigration patterns, changing national borders, intermarriage, etc. This next slide here is a graphic of U.S. population by race and ethnicity in the year 2012. We've got another graphic here that's showing us the percent distribution of the population by race of Latino or Hispanic origin from the years 1995, and then a projection of the year 2050. Got another graphic here, diversity 2000. And all of these slides you can look at more closely in our PowerPoint, which is located in Leo. So getting back to the matter at hand, cultural diversity in the United States, here's some statistics for you. 23% of children in the United States are raised in immigrant families. 11% of those immigrants are undocumented. 18% are born in the United States with at least one undocumented parent. So how does this impact parenting? How do you think this impacts parenting? So when we talk about immigrant and ethnic child development, there are several individual factors that impact children. It's age, temperament, health, biological factors, psychological factors, but there's one more important one. It's children dealing with diversity. So when we talk about diversity, we want to think about two concepts, and those concepts are assimilation versus acculturation. So assimilation is defined as the pressure to adopt the values and behavior of a new culture, while acculturation is defined as choosing the best elements of the old as well as the new cultural and forming what's called a bicultural identity. So children dealing with diversity are otherwise known as child cultural brokers. So these children, they have a lot of pressure. They tend to link cultures for both parents. They tend to have a closer bond with parents, really can impose a burden on a child, really high stakes in terms of legal documents. They may become overly independent and rebellious, not able to really identify with the primary culture of the parent. They may become confident and empowered. And the long-term impact is really unknown. We really need to research this area in terms of children with dealing with diversity much more in depth. And hopefully we'll have more research efforts in this direction. Just wanted to share an important story with you from my personal practice with working with a woman. I was providing psychotherapy for this woman for a few years, and she was born in an Eastern European country, and she emigrated to the United States early on in childhood. So when her family first came to the United States, she was able to speak English before her parents were. So her parents really had a limited command of the English language. So this particular client, her brother became gravely ill. And so my client at a very young age was put in the position where she had to translate from her primary language to English with the doctors. So she had to act as a translator between her parents and the medical staff. And unfortunately, her brother wound up dying as a result of his medical condition. And my client, even as she was living in her 8th decade of life, had a lot of guilt, unresolved guilt related to the fact that she had to act as a translator. So she really felt as if that maybe she was making decisions for her brother that she just was not equipped to make at that young age because of the fact that her parents didn't speak English and the doctors were looking to her to provide that translation service. So it's something that we want to keep in mind as professionals, that if we're ever in a position where we have a child that speaks English and perhaps parents that don't, that we don't want to put all the pressure on the child to be a translator and to be that sort of broker in the middle. We will always want to be, finding professional translation services, if and when they're available. So we're not putting all of that pressure on the child because it can have lifelong impacts, right? We talk about immigrant and ethnic child development. There's social factors that impact children, and those social factors include social position, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, as well as gender. There's racism, which includes prejudice, discrimination, and oppression. Segregation, which can be residential, economic, social, and psychological. There are promoting as well as inhibiting environments, and those include schools, neighborhoods, the media, including social media and healthcare. And there's adaptive culture, which includes traditions, acculturation, history, and politics. So we know that the impact of discrimination and oppression on cultures as well as individuals can be a strong predictor of poor functioning in immigrant children. Children that face discrimination and oppression have higher rates of depression, anxiety, and conduct problems as children. It also can result in depression and stress in parents, as well as bullying and victimization. So how do we combat discrimination? Right? Important question. So parents of culturally different children talk about their own cultural group in positive terms, provide warmth, acceptance, and support to lessen the impact of discrimination. And mainstream parents can do this by talking about other cultural groups in positive terms. So we talk about religion and parenting. This can influence law, social norms, moral codes, can overlap with ethnicity, influences behavior. Some religions say that there's no drinking, it restricts certain types of medical care, restricts birth control, has rules against premarital sex, prescribed gender roles. So trends in religion and parenting are that religiosity is associated with greater emphasis on tradition, obedience, respect for authority, and more likely to discourage independence and self-determination. And in the United States, religiosity is associated with greater warmth and closeness between parents and children. That's what the current research is telling us. When we think about the influence of socioeconomic status, we tend to think of socioeconomic status here in the United States as just referring to somebody's money or their income. But socioeconomic status is actually comprised of several factors. That first factor being parental occupation, as well as the educational level of the parents, including the level of income as well. So the general categories of socioeconomic status here in the United States consist of upper class, professional class, middle class, working class, and the welfare class. So this right here is a graphic that depicts the U.S. social class composition here. We talk about socioeconomic status and parenting. It's probably the most powerful social influence that shapes child rearing. So what research tells us is that the lower socioeconomic status means or translates into higher stress levels, fewer luxuries, less time with children, and less affection with children. So what is poverty? We're going to take the time to discuss this in our next slide. So we're going to end this lecture here, and I look forward to seeing you on part 6.